Hello, and welcome to your Data Analytics Certificate. My name's Laura, and I am the Academic Associate for the Data Analytics Certificate program. Would love to have you reach out to me anytime you have any questions or concerns. Today I'm going to kind of walk you through what we're going to be doing together for the next 4 quarters and some of the expectations you should have going in about the logistics and what being in this kind of course entails. So, you're here because you're excited about data analytics. Lots of people are excited about data analytics. Maybe your boss is excited about data analytics, so you're like, I guess it's a Wednesday off from work. Whatever the reason, you're here. Somebody's excited about data analytics, and everybody's excited because data analytics is having a moment. The trouble is, I'm not sure everybody's on the same page about what we mean when we talk about data analytics. Maybe this? At the end of this course, you'll be able to stir the pile effectively until the answers start looking right. However, perhaps we should think about, a more structured definition. At its most simple, data analytics is also known as data analysis. I like to say I never got to be one of the cool kids back when it was data analysis and all I was doing was data analysis. But once this stuff became data analytics, suddenly, for the first time ever, I'm like one of the cool kids. It's totally weird. Put a new name on it, now it's cool. Part of why that's cool is because people have started to realize what kind of gains they can make out of it, that there's some sort of productivity or business enhancement that comes out of this data analysis that we've been doing. And I think that that's important, part of this kind of idea that it's about drawing insight. So, here's how I like to think of it. As the process of examining data in order to identify and understand patterns to enhance productivity and improve financial management decisions. I think that this reflects on the world we live in, where it's not about business decisions per se, right? But that there are important financial management decisions that we're going to get to make that have something to do that we can enhance and make better with data. And that is some of the stuff that used to take everybody a lot of time becomes more mechanized. What we can do with all of those things that we've been keeping all of those careful records about, and how we can use them to make ourselves actually better, I think this is an exciting opportunity, and I think this is why people are excited about it. And so I hope you're excited to join me on this adventure of learning all of these different ways to examine data. Yes, it's going to take us 4 quarters to explore different ways to examine data to understand its patterns, and to do so without making so many stupid mistakes. So, you might be wondering, I hear it all the time, well, I know data analytics is important, but it has nothing to do with my job. And I hope that that is changing, and I hope that you find some ways that it does have something to do with your job. And I think if you're going to, it's going to fall into one of these sorts of kinds of questions that you should be asking at work. Data analytics allows us to answer some different kinds of questions, and we need certain different techniques and different approaches to answer these different kinds of questions. That's part of what's going to take us 4 quarters to get there. The first one is, what are the implications of policy changes? So this question has a lot to do with with causality, which is a tricky thing in the data analytics world, and it's what we're going to tackle in the 3rd quarter. But it has to do with policy changes both within your organization and outside of your organization. Things that you control, things that you don't control. We want to predict the future, predict what's going to happen under the guise of certain things changing. Or we want to see what would happen depending on the kinds of changes that we make. These are things that we want to know all of the time, often. And if you're in an organization that makes any kind of policy or reacts to any kind of policy, understanding the implications of policy changes and what the data have to tell us about them is an important kind of question. We also tend to want to plan for the future, plan our budgets, whether that future is, how much are we going to need to spend by the end of this fiscal year, or how much extra money are we going to have to go to Congress for, right? And we're asking it in April because we need to have it, spent by August. Or is it, how should we plan for a 5-year future? How should we create budgets or create other kinds of things that are 5-year, that are longer term plans, maybe 2 years. How should we focus resources to improve outcomes? So this one is important too, right? Because ultimately we live in a world of limited resources. If we didn't live in a world of limited resources, instead of sitting here in my house talking to you about data analytics, I'd be off at the beach enjoying another beautiful day here in Monterey, California. Hope you all get to come visit sometime. But instead of being at the beach, I'm here talking to you about data analytics because we live in a world of limited resources and we need to manage those limited resources. And ultimately, I don't know, I like to think about my time at the federal government as have I improved efficiency enough to pay for myself? And perhaps that's silly, but ultimately, we want to think about focusing resources to improve outcomes. And I think that that's an important thing that we can do. If we spend more money here instead of there, will it make some kind of difference? If we write different kinds of contracts, will it make some kind of difference? Things like that. That's all about focusing our resources and putting them in the places where we get the most bang for our buck. So part of why everyone's so excited about data analytics is our newfound ability to harness big data. It's part of why the Navy is sponsoring part of this program, is because they've bought in to some new ways for us to manage our big data. And that can allow us to analyze it in new and exciting ways that before would have been quite, sort of overwhelming. So I think big data is a funny thing because data in DoD can seem big, but not be all that big. I have downloaded and analyzed, 17 million observations of across, probably 100, 200 features, variables, columns, if you will, of data onto my personal computer. Is that a big data set? I don't know. It seems like it's big. I can't go and clean it by hand, but certainly it can be managed by a single computer. Often when we talk about big data, we're talking about this kind of messy new world of data that we live in, where the data contains volumes that can't be managed on an individual computer. So part of what Advana and Jupyter do is that they allow and part of what you're going to do is we're going to do distributed machine learning, where we have to work across multiple computers at once to try to get to, because we have data sets that are just too big to put in a single computer. And this can help us find patterns even in very noisy, complicated data. What part of this big data too is data that contains greater variety. As we explore all of the new and exciting, big language models, this is a bizarre variety of data that those kinds of models are trying to analyze. And it seems to arrive in increasing volumes and at ever higher velocity. Is it generated by the second, Generated by the microsecond? What do you do with data that comes at you that quickly and frequently? Which also gives you an increasing volume and can have high variety, It's crazy. And we're going to start to learn at all of the different ways that we kind of manage this big new world of data. But we're going to start with some very simple things. A big part of what we're going to do, and what I think you will be masters of by the end of this program, is making choices about modeling. We want to use the right kinds of models for the right kinds of questions. There are a lot of different models out there. When you hire contractors to do the modeling for you, they tend to build you a black box of a model and the variables sometimes that go into that model, and then give you some kind of answer. Well, we're going to break down those black boxes. We're going to live in transparent boxes where we are explicit about the kinds of choices we make and the kinds of questions we're trying to answer. We're also going to focus on understanding the data that we have. Here we're going to consider the limitations of the data and the challenges that data poses in answering particular types of questions. So this is where I think I spend my life disappointing people, because it's exciting that there's all this data available, but the data can only tell you what the data can tell you. And so understanding what the data is, what its limitations are, is it clean, is it messy, what kinds of answers it gives you, what's baked into those answers, All of that kind of stuff is going to be baked into the analysis that we do. And we want to be really explicit about how we're thinking about our data. And we're going to spend a significant amount of time thinking about the data we have and what we can do with it. I like to think of data analytics as this kind of trifecta of three things that work together. One of them is understanding data, understanding what process generates that data, where our data comes from, what kind of data it is, what its limitations are, what it can be used for, applying statistics to it. So yes, there's some statistics involved in data analytics. This is a highly disappointing feature as well for people. One, data can't tell you always the answer to the questions you wish you knew the answers to. It can only tell you the answers to the questions that it can. And it's only as good as the past is a good predictor of the future. If the past tells you nothing about the future, then data about the past can tell you nothing about the future. These are the ways I usually disappoint people when I provide them with analytic content. The way I usually disappoint people when I tell them about what it takes to learn to be a good data analyst is that you should have some grasp of statistics and how statistics works. Because understanding some of the fundamental mathematics, sort of intuition of statistics, I don't expect you to master the mathematics of statistics, but I do expect you to understand the intuition of statistics and how we come to statistical answers. And doing that is a little bit hard. And it's a little bit of work. Some of you may have done it before. Sorry to tell you, you have to do it again, but it's an important part of this as well. And then we put those kinds of things, that data and our statistical reasoning, we apply it to different kinds of models that can give us different kinds of answers in different circumstances about our data. So quarter one, we're going to make you tackle statistics and probability in an Excel-based course. Why Excel-based? Because you probably already feel comfortable with Excel. And since it's been a while since you slept through your undergraduate statistics class, we'd like you to warm up with a class that sort of remasters all of that statistics and probability in a context that's somewhat applied to defense-related problems and issues. So why statistics? Well, if you remember from those undergraduate statistics classes you might have taken, statistics is about measuring variation and finding patterns in data. In fact, that sounds a whole lot like data analytics, right? With statistics, we describe our data, and this involves some fairly basic things that you'll learn fairly quickly to find ways to describe data. You may use averages, but there's other measures of central tendency besides averages that are important as part of using basic statistics. We're also going to do inference. This is a sort of more, I think, right, the next step is towards drawing conclusions from your data. For this, we need things like probability distributions, and we'll do hypothesis testing and confidence interval building and ultimately prediction interval building. But this is all about what kinds of conclusions are we drawing and how are we drawing those conclusions and how strong are those conclusions. For this, we need some statistical measurements and some statistical tools. And then there's the thing that everybody wants to do. They want to find drivers behind the patterns that they see. This is a lot of what all that model building is going to do, is going to examine what shapes the pattern. How can we, change the pattern? This is largely fundamentally about correlation. So we're looking at how are things related to each other. And at its very basic level, you will tackle these concepts of correlation even in the very first quarter of this class. Quarter two, I get to join you again, I believe, in quarter two, and we're going to take a look at an introduction to machine learning and predictive analytics. So here, that sounds complicated, right? It sounds crazy. Can you believe it? Our multivariate modeling class, we're going to take a look at models for regression and classification and time series data. And we're going to jump into using R as our sort of software of choice for analyzing this data. We use R rather than Excel because Excel reaches its limitations in these things rather quickly. There are add-ins you can buy to Excel, but R is free statistical software that will get you a long way towards your machine learning in your machine learning life. it was built by statisticians for statisticians and data analysts. So it's very much structured to be able to analyze data. It's all about analyzing data. We choose it for this program over Python, so we could go to a more sort of complex language because of the same reasons I just said. It's built by data people to do data things and has more capability in an easier to access package than Python does at this time. So for those reasons, we're going to use R as our programming language of choice. We'll use RStudio as our implementation of that programming language. Don't worry, all of these things will be made clear. Your teachers are going to, your professors are going to help you install this as we go and get this up and running by the end of the first quarter, so you're ready to go in the second quarter to use R to do the things you've done and then move into some of these more advanced modeling techniques. But if that sounds too scary, right, let us know and we'll see if we can make that a little less scary. We'll spend some time on learning to think like a programmer and learning to implement, right, these kinds of things in that environment. Quarter 3, I'm excited about quarter 3, is where we get into a lot of the things that you either think you want to learn about or don't know that you want to learn about, but that you do want to learn about. And some of the things that you wish you could forget because they bring up the limitations of data analytics. So we're going to take a look very specifically at more modeling choices in quarter 3. We're going to venture into non-parametric modeling, cross-validation, shrinkage, different ways so feature selection essentially, and different ways that we make our models perform better. We're going to tune our models to make better performing models. And when we say better performing models, we want to get at prediction and causation, right? Or in some cases prediction and in some cases causation. And these are two different pathways that we go down. So if we want to understand the implications of policy changes, we probably want to understand, is there some causal mechanism? Is there something about these policy changes that drives something? Or is there some sort of historical coincidence or third factor that played into account in some of the data we have about what's happened in the past? So if I have sequestration, what's going to happen? Well, I'd want to know, right? I'd want to dig in farther than just simply what happened to the civilian workforce the last time there was sequestration. I'd want to dig into why. And there's some modeling techniques that allow us to dig deeper into why. Predictive models, ironically, largely don't dig into why. They're willing to accept sort of the more superficial of how things relate to each other in order to try to tune themselves to the best predictions possible to help people get to more precise answers from the past. Yes, they make some assumptions about causation that are there, and sometimes people infer causation, but they're not really about that. They accept that there could be underlying mechanisms we don't understand, but that things are good predictors of other things. Still, there's a lot to do to get to those best predictive models. There are new kinds of techniques that advanced computing make as easy to implement as some of the simple techniques that we'll have tackled in quarter 2. It's also a good time to introduce you to Advana. Part of what we want to do is move into doing this kind of analysis in the distributed environment. I'm not going to jump ahead to quarter 4 here, but as we learn to build visualizations, right, as one of the modeling things that we might want to get at involves data visualization, we're going to work on getting ourselves into ClickSense or Tableau to build to build visualizations that are effective at communicating the results of our analysis and the behaviors we see in the data. In order to do more model building and apply this in a practical context across the Department of Defense, we're going to adventure deeper into Advana and the Navy's implementation of it in Jupyter, and look at doing distributed learning using Databricks and DataRobot, data visualization using ClickSense and or Tableau, to try to get at, right, getting some better real world answers to some real world DoD problems that we face. So with that, right, 4 quarters, we're going to keep you busy. But you might want to know some practical things too. The first practical thing you might want to know is, how are we going to connect with you? We're going to use Zoom. We find it's more stable, and we have fewer problems across sort of different commands than when we use Teams for classroom meetings. So we're going to connect with Zoom. Now, some of you may say, hey, I'm not allowed to install the Zoom app on my work computer. Well, we have some options for you. One, you can go and harass people at work, if you can, to install the Zoom app on your work computer. Another option is that you can use your work computer many times with the web link, even if you can't install the application. So if you can use it within a browser on that computer, you're good to go. You may need another workaround. You may need to use a phone or a tablet. We'd prefer that you use a computer where you can, like, say, share your screen, so that when you're doing analysis with your classmates or following along with the lab, we can have a more interactive experience. But if you can't, that's okay too. So it's better if you can screen share your Excel, ultimately your RStudio, hey, even your Advana. But if you can't do all of that because of the computer limitations you have, right, any of these things can be a solution to try to connect with us on Zoom for class. Your computer or phone or tablet should have a camera and a microphone that work so that you can participate fully in our class. We'd also like you to have a computer with access, at least for now, to Excel and the analysis tool pack. For subsequent quarters, you're going to need to install R and RStudio on a computer, and you're going to need to have access to Advana. There's paperwork involved with getting access to Advana, and we can help you with this paperwork. There are also ways to do this using your personal computer through the NPS computing. NPS has computing resources that you can connect a personal computer through our cloud services to Advana, or you can use a work government computer to do that. It does require CAC access. Finally, you're going to need access to your NPS account. Hopefully you have this up and running. Messages will come to your NPS account. Any updates come to your NPS account. Try to check it daily. We use Sakai to organize and disseminate materials, so your assignments, your readings, all of these things are going to be available to you on Sakai. The Zoom link for your first class next Wednesday at 10. This is it. Here's the link for Sakai. You'll need to sign in with your NPS credentials, and then you should be able to to get access to all the stuff about your courses. A little nitpicky thing is we'd like you to turn your camera on. I understand that a few of you may be operating in an environment where you can't turn a camera on, but you need to be able to access a camera and a microphone generally. This sucks, right? A screen of just endless black screens for 3 hours, talking into a void, a teacher talking into a void. You might as well watch a video as be in an interactive environment. So please, if you can, turn your camera on. And if you can't, you need to clear this with your instructor. Other expectations. You should expect to spend 3 hours in class each week from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific time. And you should expect to have to do some homework. The official expectations are about 6 hours a week outside of class for each 3-unit class you take per week. This will include reading and computer-based assignments, exams, graded homework. If it's taking you wildly more than 6 hours a week to get done with your work, please reach out to an instructor. And see if we can work on something to make it more manageable. We know you have jobs. We know that this is, that this is a lot of work and that this is a big commitment outside your normal day-to-day. But we would encourage you to sort of keep at it and do the work so that you grow and learn as much as possible. Finally, that homework can involve some math, some coding, and some logical reasoning. So we expect you to use all of these different parts of your brain to come up with the best sort of outcomes possible. With that, welcome aboard, and we can't wait to jump into this big, exciting world of data analytics with you. Thanks.